Here's how you can buy an entire fourplex building with just a 3.5% down payment. And how do I know that you can do this? Because it is exactly how I began myself. This can really actionably build your wealth here. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Yeah, I went from a rent-paying tenant one day where I had never owned property of any kind in my entire life because I didn't have much money, to the very next day becoming a fourplex owner collecting rents. This is what you can do too. If you want to improve yourself from poor to middle class or middle class into true wealth, then you need to think big, but importantly, follow up on that abundant thought with strategy and action. Now, first of all, why a fourplex? Why a four-family building? Well, for one thing, this is the largest building that you can buy with an advantageous FHA loan, a Federal Housing Administration loan, and you can use an FHA loan in just exactly this way. You can buy a single-family home, duplex, triplex, or fourplex. Use just a 3.5% down payment, and you can even borrow this from your family. Secondly, your credit score can be as low as 580, but if you get a higher credit score, you're going to get a lower interest rate. Thirdly, you need to reside in one unit for at least 12 months. That's called owner occupying it. The owner occupies the unit. And then fourthly, you need to be a U.S. citizen. Now, a VA loan program is pretty similar, a Veterans Administration. If you happen to be a military veteran, then you would have 0 down payment rather than 3.5 with this FHA program that we're talking about. And in order to do this, you don't need any formal education. You don't need any degree. You don't need any qualification course, and you don't need a real estate license. And understand that unless the building is new when you buy it, it is going to be occupied with tenants on that day that you own it already. Now, this could be good because you should have immediate rent income, but this can also be bad because you're not the one that screened the tenants. That outgoing owner, that seller did. What you need to do is ask the seller for a record of those tenants' rent payments. See their payment history. And in real estate, that comes in the form of what is known as an estoppel certificate. Kind of a strange sounding name, but what an estoppel certificate is that's just the document that shows whether or not those current tenants have been paying the rent and some other things, like if there are any prior existing agreements between the tenant and that outgoing owner. That should all be there on those estoppel certificates, so you know what you're buying into, because in a sense, you're not just buying the building, but you're also buying those tenant income streams that come along with it. Hey, go ahead and put a like on this if you like this content that I'm giving you here on YouTube. But now you might be thinking, well, I don't know, this all sounds great, but isn't a fourplex kind of expensive? And even with a 3.5% down payment, I'm not sure if I can afford like the ongoing monthly expenses. And what all am I getting into here? Like, how do I know that I'm going to have the income cushion to handle this? Well, a really big part of this for you, and you know, this really plays into, as they say, don't think I can't afford it. An abundantly minded question instead that you can ask yourself is, how can I afford it? And here's how. With an FHA loan, you can use 75% of the building's existing tenants' rent income toward your qualification before you even purchase the property. So you can take the rent incomes from the 3 tenants, every unit except the one that you're going to be occupying, and use 75% of that. You see, what you really want to do, and this is a big mindset shift, is now you're beginning to focus on using other people's money ethically to build wealth for yourself. And if you really want to build wealth, this is a paradigm shift. Maybe you've never heard this before. Don't focus on getting your money to work for you. You heard me right. That's actually a small way of thinking. Instead, focus on ethically getting other people's money to work for you. And with a fourplex that's bought right, you're actually using other people's money 3 ways at the same time. The first way is that you're using the tenant's money for your qualification, like I just discussed, and the ongoing monthly income, using the bank's money to control the building and use leverage, and using the government's money for very generous tax incentives at scale. Yes, you're actually using other people's money 3 ways at the same time, not just your own. That's a real paradigm shift here. Now understand, a good thing about the FHA loan is that this is not a brand new program. This has existed for decades. It is proven. We're not speculating on something here. Buying a fourplex was my springboard to wealth through real estate. So I grew equity on the value of an entire building rather than just one single family home. Now, as good as this sounds so far, and it is good overall, but there are some things that you do need to be careful for, and this isn't any sort of comprehensive list of every precaution possible, but here are just a few guidelines that you ought to be mindful of. Buy in a market or a neighborhood that has a stable or growing employment base nearby, because you need to keep your building occupied with rent-paying tenants that have jobs. Find a fourplex whose 4 monthly rent incomes equal or exceed somewhere around 0.75%, or even find a fourplex whose 4 monthly rent incomes equal or exceed about 0.75% of the purchase price. So let me give you some examples here. Say it's a total of $3,000 of monthly rent income on all 4 of those units on a $400K fourplex, or $6,000 of monthly rent income on an $800,000 fourplex. Those are those 0.75% ratios. If you can get up closer to the full 1%, clearly that is better. Another important thing to ask yourself and look out for is this a neighborhood that you would feel safe in? And is it a neighborhood where a good property manager is going to manage it long term after you move out, after your year plus of residency, and then you can retain the asset over the long term? You're not looking for beautiful. Beautiful doesn't really correspond with profitable in long-term rentals. A better question to ask yourself than is it beautiful is, will it secure an income stream? That's a key question. Another thing you got to be mindful of is you are the landlord, so you're likely going to be self-managing your 3 tenants when you live in one of the 4 units there. You're almost certainly going to have some people problems. This is the classroom of life. You know, some tenants can be sort of persnickety, like, hey, can you come over and just tighten up these loose kitchen cabinet doors again? You know, something really ticky-tacky like that. And, you know, then on the other end of the spectrum, sometimes you want tenants to communicate with you. Like, what if there a kitchen drain leak and it's slowly leaking down into the subfloor? Well, that's something that you would want to know about sooner. Another thing you need to be mindful of is we're talking about all the income. Understand your expenses are a mortgage principal payment, a mortgage interest payment, private mortgage insurance. You're going to have a factor for vacancy. Your units aren't going to be occupied all the time. You're going to have a regular property insurance premium you need to pay, maintenance expenses, property taxes, and then some utility payments, depending on how many of the utilities that your tenants pay versus how many you pay. So the more separately metered utilities the fourplex has, the more likely the tenants can make the utility payments. And I can actually show you an example of that right here. Here is the exact fourplex building that I bought. This is where it all began. One thing you can notice as you look at this is notice the doors. All 4 units had a separate entrance side by side. This is what we call townhouse style. Each tenant, therefore, had their own electric and natural gas heat meters so they could pay all of their utilities. And by the way, if you look closely, the 3rd door from the left is where I lived. Yeah, it looks like someone has since hung an American flag over that door there. That's where I used to live. So there was no common entrance in a townhouse style fourplex like this. And this is seen as like a preferable fourplex style rather than up and down. Everyone has their own separate entrance to the outdoors. You have privacy. That matters to you because you're going to be living there at least 12 months yourself. Now, you might still be thinking to yourself, yeah, I don't know, am I capable of pulling off? Are there any other skill sets that it takes? Well, you don't need to be a handyman because I am not handy with things. I'm really bad at fixing things or assembling most anything around the house. I'm really more of a communicator. Like when a tenant had a problem with her hot water heater shortly after I bought the building, she just felt like I communicated with her and I was genuinely letting her know that I was going to fix it promptly because I cared about her and her family having hot water. So I'm more of a communicator, not a handyman. Now understand that when you move out after a year or more of on-site residence here, the good thing is that you just vacated one of the 4 units. Yeah, so now rather than just 3 rent incomes, you've got 4. And a lot of times this is where you actually become cash flow positive, where your rent income exceeds all of your expenses. So if you're thinking about doing this, what you can do a while as you get financially ready to buy a fourplex with an FHA loan is build up your credit score a while, pay all of your bills on time. Very few people know about FHA loans and fourplex buildings. And I got to tell you, it's not like an absolutely certain path to wealth. Investing does involve risk, but doing this greatly increases your chances of building wealth. Buying a fourplex with an FHA loan, this is a specific, actionable idea. And ideas are like a little hinge, and little hinges open up big doors. So what do you think? Will you open up your big door and act? You know, to have wealth, you need to think differently and act. Expand your comfort zone, learn about things like this, and be bold. And if you like ideas like this, you can listen to me weekly on the Get Rich Education audio podcast. There is a new show every Monday with 4.3 million listener downloads. It's my most popular platform. You can just grab the free Get Rich Education phone app. If you don't know about podcasts, it's all free. I'm Keith Weinhold. Hey, go ahead and leave a comment below. I'd like to know if you have any comments or just any other questions about this, maybe something that I didn't cover. Here's to your wealth and success.